All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Our speaker tonight is Dan Rooker, class of 2012. He's a student loan professional and owns a financial planning firm based in Chicago for healthcare practitioners who have student loans or student debt. He is also a contributing author and consultant at studentloanplanner.com. And unknown to the public, but known to us here on this webinar, he's also a consultant for a property management company founded by Kenyan class of 2013 grad, Daniel Glazer. So thank you, Dan, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Great. So just structure for the call, I'm going to present for about 30 minutes. And if anyone here has questions, throw them in the chat queue now, along the way, at the end. If you wanted to ask your question by raising your hand at the end, you can take yourself off mute and we can cover that then. But 30 minutes of presentation, however long we want to spend doing Q&A, and then we'll cut off the recording at that point. So what I'm presenting on, I'm just going to share my screen, is mainly around if you have graduate school loans or you're going to have graduate school loans, how to think about it, how to approach that. And I'm drawing off of experience with student loan consults I've done through Student Loan Planner, student loan planning I've done prior to that, and my own history with student loans too. So if you have gotten into grad school, I'm just setting the scene for you, and you're thinking about how to approach your loans. I would focus on the things you can control. So when you're in grad school, you're already in at the program you want to be in, it costs whatever it's going to cost. And you're either funding it from federal loans or from private wealth, or you're taking out private loans. If you're already in that position, just focus on the things you can do, which is get good grades, graduate, and then outside of school, think about building a professional network. When you're done with grad school, you want to be able to tap that network that you've created, that you've been working on creating, building relationships to either get the job you're looking for or just help propel you into the job that you apply for with good letters of reference, or just people who can connect you with their network. I think one of the biggest opportunities of grad school is that you are approaching networking, or have the opportunity to approach network. And I'm not saying that a lot of people do, but you have the opportunity as a more full-fledged adult. And so if you're not in grad school yet, and you're still weighing the costs of grad school, where to go, there are different ways to tackle that. Like you're balancing prestige of the school program you're applying to, along with the cost of the program and how you're going to fund it, whether you're going to fund it with private loans or federal loans. But looking beyond that, when you're done with grad school, what you're going to, hold on one second. I have a very heavy 150-pound dog wanting to go upstairs. So he's upstairs now, we're good to go. So you start loan repayment after grad school, and you have two paths. Either you're going to go for loan forgiveness, or you're going to pay it down to zero, one of the two. And generally what I found best when sitting on the precipice of starting to pay your loans back is going one direction or the other, not cutting it in the middle and refinancing some of your loans and going for loan forgiveness with other pieces of your loans. You want to go all the way loan forgiveness, I call that passive, and all the way paid down to zero, I call that aggressive. And one of those two paths is the best on paper. And after that, once you figured out what to do with your loans, how to tackle them within the federal system or in the private system, the best thing you can do for your personal finances after that is just plan out every large financial transaction that you have coming up, whether it's buying a car, buying a home, buying a second home, whatever it may be. Anything that's a large 5-figure financial transaction should be planned out, shouldn't be done impulsively. That's an opinion. All right. So if you're in grad school, some people might be wondering like how much they might owe depending on the occupation they're going for. And on the left is what Google and the media say. We owe $1.5 trillion. The average balance is $31,000. And if you're going to grad school, it doesn't even look like anywhere close to that, because the averages are skewed by the folks who have their parents or grandparents paying for grad school, or they're paying their way through it, or their employers paying for it for them. But if you're in one of the occupations on the right, very likely, except for maybe the engineer, very likely your company that you work for before grad school is not going to pay for grad school. And these are actual averages that change every day based on the total number of consults that we've seen at Student Loan Planner. To date, since Student Loan Planner started, we've done a little over 6,000 one-on-one consults between the 6 of us consultants. And these are our averages. I just pulled up the top, I think, 20-ish. And these averages show us and confirm like, okay, it's a lot more expensive to go to grad school than what Google says. So how do you pay it back? Like once you get there and you finish grad school, you finish medical school, pharmacy school, whatever it is, you got your 2 options: pay it down to 0, and you're always going to pay back what you owe plus interest, or go for loan forgiveness. And these are 2 things that I use if I want to have just kind of an idea of where I'm going to end up with the math before I even do any of the math. If you're going to finish grad school and work for a for-profit employer, so public service loan forgiveness is not an option based on where you're going to work, then you want to do the math to figure out if a long-term loan forgiveness plan, which is 20 years or 25 years long, depending on which of the 5 income-driven plans you pick. And the way you figure out like whether it's worth it to even do the math is just take your income that you're going to earn in your first year after grad school. A little bit different if you're a physician. Don't base it off of your residency or fellowship income, but off of your attending salary. And multiply your income by 1.25. So example, if you make $100,000 for your salary after your first year of grad school, like that's what you're projected to make, then it makes sense to follow loan forgiveness if you're going to owe over $125,000 in student loans, in federal student loans. For the public service loan forgiveness math, if you owe, in that same scenario, $75,000 or more in student debt, then public service loan forgiveness math is going to work out well for you if you're working for a qualified employer. And in case I forget to say it later, a qualified employer is a nonprofit, like 501c3 organized entity, a state employer, or a government employer. Those are qualified employers as it relates to public service loan forgiveness. And because I hate acronyms with a passion, I don't know why I even threw these in here. I should have spelled them out. IDR stands for income-driven repayment. Income-driven repayment plans, there's 5 of them. And income-driven repayment is the umbrella term to define 5 of the 9 federal payment plans. Those 5, I may go over a little after this in our example. Yeah, so I'm setting up here a case study or an example. Let's go through this. My favorite TV show currently is Billions. I'm almost done with season 4. So I'm picking Bobby and Lara Axelrod as our names. I'm pulling these debt scenarios, these debt amounts from our averages from that couple slides ago. So our average pharmacist that books at Student Loan Planner owes $230,000. Our average professor that books at Student Loan Planner owes $182,000. And these are pretty typical incomes, annual salaries for our borrowers who book us. And I just threw our borrowers here in this example into the state of Ohio. If a borrower books with me and they send me their federal student loan file, it looks a lot like these loans laid out in purple here on screen. You've got a Stafford loan and a Graduate Plus loan for every year of grad school. And if you do 4 years of grad school, then you've got at least 8 loans, probably. The first $20,500 can come from a Stafford loan, and the rest of it comes from a Grad Plus loan. The difference between the two is origination fees and the interest rate. Origination fees for Stafford loans are 1%. To just take the loan out, they add on 1% to the amount of the loan you're taking out. And for Grad Plus loans, it's 4%. For the interest rate, the Grad Plus interest rate is always 1% higher than the Stafford loan interest rate. And those interest rates change each school year. Okay, so I'm going to pull up an Excel sheet to go through our example so you can kind of see what I go through in a consult through Student Loan Planner, also through my client base as well. And what I have teed up is this here. And what I've thrown in for everybody is Bobby's loan balance and Lara's loan balance, pharmacist, professor, an average interest rate. And let's just pretend that they both graduated at the same time this year. And they're projected to work for the rest of this year, for a couple months of this year. So they graduated in May, and they're going to, they started working, and they're working through the end of this calendar year. They both work for nonprofit employers. Bobby is at a nonprofit hospital system as a pharmacist. He's not at CVS or Walgreens. He's working at a nonprofit hospital. And Lara's at a university, a nonprofit university like Kenyon, where she's earning an income, and both employers are qualified employers as it relates to public service loan forgiveness. And they borrowed after 2007. They're married, they don't have kids. Here's their incomes on a go-forward basis, increased by inflation. And for the 4 months of the year that Bobby worked, his expected salary for the current year is $43,000, and then for Lara, $30,000. If they get onto an income-driven plan, how those income-driven plans work is they calculate the payment based off of last year's income. So for 2021 payments, their monthly payments would be based off of 2020's income. And then for payments going forward, it would be based off of their full year salary income. And for them, these payments would be a lot less than, say, paying it back to zero in 10 years. If they wanted to pay their loans back to zero in 10 years, the total of their loans, it would be $4,500 per month. And if they got a better interest rate on the private market, say 3% instead of 6%, it'd be about $4,000 a month. And over on the right over here, we have their total loan balances going down to zero, as depending on the loan plan that they pick. Now, I'm going to just go here for a second and sidestep to just tell you how I think about all of the income-driven plans out there. So you've got income-driven repayment IDR plans. There's 5 of them. Those plans are the income contingent repayment plan from the Clinton administration, the old income-based repayment plan a few years later, pay-as-you-earn, revised pay-as-you-earn, and new income-based repayment. Those are the 5 income-driven plans that exist in the federal system. Outside of them, you've got the non-income-driven repayment plans that exist. And those major 4 are the standard plan, the extended plan, the graduated plan, and they got real creative with this last one, the extended graduated plan. The standard plan says, what's the payment to pay this loan off in 10 years? That's simply 1%, roughly 1% of the total loan balance here. And that's a little bit less than that 4,500 number. I just use 1% as an approximation to kind of like give us a baseline of how to think of, all right, for the loan balance, what would pay it off, paid every month for 10 years. If you're choosing one of these plans down here, it goes all the way up to 30 years, and there are millions of borrowers on these loan plans, and there really shouldn't be anybody on these loan plans. But the problem is it's a really underserved space. There's 170 of me in the United States, and there's 46 plus million borrowers. Tremendously underserved space. People are not getting qualified advice. On the non-income driven plan side, I call these pay it down to zero plans. That's how I think about it. You're always paying back what you owe plus interest. And if you're extending your term from 10 years out to 30 years, yeah, you're lowering your payment. But all you're really doing is increasing your total cost. And with these plans up here, the way I think about them is a little bit differently. These are loan forgiveness plans. They each have a term, kind of like a mortgage that looks like this. Oops, looks like this. They each take a percentage of your discretionary income that looks like this. And if you're working for just any employer, not a nonprofit, but a for-profit employer, and you stay on one of these plans for the length of the term, 20 or 25 years, the balance is at the end forgiven and added to your income. Forgiven and added to your income and taxed in that year, 20 or 25th year. If you work for a qualified employer, how I think about that is a lot of people mistake this. It's not a different income-driven plan. It's an overlay of all of these plans. So, and what it says is if you're on one of these plans, you're making payments every year as required per the plan based on last year's income, then you can make payments for 10 years, 120 payments. And at the end of that time period, the balance is forgiven and tax-free. So it's a double-edged sword in a good way. It's forgiven, the term is lower, shorter, and it's not taxable. So, that's good in that, if you happen to work for a qualified employer, you can strategically plan to afterwards, then the balance forgiven at 10 years means that the interest rate doesn't really matter. If it's a really high interest rate, a larger balance forgiven tax-free is the same to you as a lower balance forgiven tax-free. So, a lot of folks in that position can think strategically about where they want to go to school and maybe purposefully go to the most expensive school because it's the most prestigious. And if it's the most prestigious, and they're going to get their loans forgiven tax-free, then go to NYU Dental School. Like, do it because it's the number one, because you're going to get the best job afterwards. Doesn't matter that it costs $700,000 to go to. One thing I'll add to this, if married, these plans treat you differently. So if married, if you file married filing separately, you can exclude your spouse's income from the calculation. Same thing for this plan, same thing for this plan, same thing for this plan. This plan says don't care how you file, always including spouse's income, which is interesting to me because this is the default plan. If you call your loan servicer and say, hey, I can't make my payment, I saw this bill, I freaked out, and it's 6 months after I graduate grad school, I can't make that payment, put me on an income-driven plan, they put you on this plan. And if you're married, that's not exactly the best plan to be on. You might want to be on this plan or this plan. So that's how I think about the federal system. If you're landing in the camp of, I don't owe enough to make long-term loan forgiveness worth it, or I don't owe enough to make public service loan forgiveness worth it, then you're down here. And if you're down here, you should probably consider a private lender, simply because they'll give you a lower interest rate. No more complicated than that. If you're paying back what you owe plus interest, then you want to pay back less interest. And a private lender lets you do that. Just keep in mind that it's a one-way ticket. You can't change your mind. Once you jump from the federal loan space to the private space, you can't change your mind. And you have control over the repayment period to the extent that you lock in a loan, whatever it is. Okay, so having sidebarred, I'm going to go right back to this example, and we're going to look at these payments over time in the big picture. If our borrowers, Bobby and Lara, got on the pay-as-you-earn plan and they pursued PSLF, they would end up, let me just check this number. Yeah. They would end up paying $200,000 back over 10 years. They have a balance of $450,000 forgiven tax-free. Now, remember, they started with $230,000. I'm sorry. They started with $412,000. They paid $200,000 collectively combined. The balance forgiven at 10 years is $459,000 tax-free. The next best alternative would be to pay it down to zero, maybe, or go for long-term. And, in the case of a long-term scenario, what they're doing is they're making payments for 20 years, and then they have a balance forgiven of which there's a tax bill. And I'm running 40% of this number as their tax bill. You add those two together and reflect it in today's dollars, it's the next lowest number on the column. And so plan A would be pay, pursue PSLF. Plan B would be pay long-term, work for any employer. Plan C would be pay down to zero and refi. And the to cost into today's dollars, like how I think of this column here, is if Bobby and Lara were going to the car dealership and they were trying to purchase a car, walk off the lot with a car that day, and every car in the lot is identical in every single way, they just have different price tags on them. If they want to write a check for their student loan strategy today, in today's dollars, and they had a lump sum available, these are the different price tags for loan strategies that end at different points in time. This column helps present things apples to apples. And so you can see that the lowest number, obviously, is public service loan forgiveness. The next lowest number, not so obvious, is pay as you earn long term. And the next lowest number is refinancing and paying it down to zero. Now, if you're going to go this strategy, something to keep in mind for those of you watching or for people watching this recording later, is this tax bill may or may not happen. This plan started December of 2012. It's a 20-year plan. The first year that we'll see a lot of borrowers getting loan forgiveness on this plan is 2033. And what they should be doing, and what a lot of people, I can tell you, won't be doing, is they should be saving a monthly amount into a brokerage account that maybe could earn 5% or something to prepare for this tax bill, so that worst case, what they've written into the document actually happens and you have enough money to pay for the tax bill. If there is no tax bill, then it's definitely the second best in that column. And you get to walk away with the cash that you've saved. But I don't plan for that. What I plan on is worst case scenario. Plan on there being a tax bill. Know that your peers will probably not be prepared to pay it, but you will. And if in aggregate, whoever's in office at that point in time wants to bail everyone out and reduce the tax bill, then you're not super stressed about it. All right. I am going to stop my share and go back to our presentation. Let's go there. So our takeaways for this presentation is the cost of graduate school extends far beyond graduation. You will have payments to make after, so don't pick your grad school just based on wherever you happen to get in. Try to be strategic about where you're going, why, what you're doing afterwards. You have an opportunity to do the math now. I see, 10 to 15 new people every week through Student Loan Planner. You don't have to go to studentloanplanner.com, but we are number one online. So there's 6 of us there, and we see a lot of volume. Your long-term savings rate. Okay, so I didn't illustrate this earlier, but what I will say is, if you can save 20% of whatever you take home for 30 years, that will make a much larger difference in your work optional date than your student loan strategy. Even if PSLF in this example saved $100,000+, with Bobby and Lara, if they're saving at 20% in the long term, that makes about a decade's difference in when work becomes optional for them. And the PSLF strategy, instead of doing that and just paying it down to zero, that makes about a 1-year difference. So it's 10 times more important to have a high savings rate. And you can include your student loan payments in your savings rate. Just when your student loan payments stop, continue to save it into your savings account or brokerage account. Okay, I'm going to open this up for Q&A. That's my QR code for a bunch of different ways to get in touch with me. This is an Instagram live on the right that I did yesterday for Student Loan Planner. It's recorded. It's on their Instagram at Student Loan Planner. I'm going to turn it over to Tristan just for a few minutes, if there are any questions. And if you want to just raise your hand and ask too, but Tristan, let me know when you want to stop the recording and we can still continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have any questions for Dan?
Hey Dan, thanks for the talk. Appreciate the advice.
Sure.
I'm going to be starting dental school next year, and I guess it's like generally for you, when you advise dental students, like what's like the most common type of plan that you see them take?
Common type of plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go to dental school, so like I have a couple different, good question, because dentists are number 2 consult booked. Number 1's physicians, number 2 are dentists. And I have a couple different specialties on this screen too. When you finish dental school, so you can't do anything while you're in dental school to pick a plan. You have to wait until the financial aid office communicates with National Student Loan Clearinghouse about 3 weeks after you finish dental school. And at that point, what they're telling National Student Clearinghouse is, hey, these borrowers have graduated. So change their status from in-school deferment to in grace period. And you could wait 6 months and let grace period just play out. But if you owe $400,000, like this dentist average we have here, then at 6%, that's $24,000 a year. Every month that you wait, your loan balance goes up by $2,000. And so it's not in your best interest to do nothing. Instead, you should skip the grace period, consolidate, because that's the only way to skip the grace period is consolidate your loans on studentaid.gov and get on an income-driven plan that allows you to make payments based off of last year's income. So what I would do is the spring that you graduate, make sure to file a tax return before you graduate. File a tax return to get something in the system that says, I made 0 last year. Free through irs.gov. File a tax return, then consolidate in June. When you consolidate, it's going to look at current pay, which you don't want to produce or show if you're an associate. You don't want to show your current pay because they'll calculate your monthly payment for the next year on that. You actually want them to look at last year's tax return. So it'll pull into tax return. And as long as your income's under $20,000, your payment will be $0 per month for the first 12 months. That will allow you as an associate dentist to build cash and for any purpose. Building cash to have cash, building a $50,000 cash cushion to have enough to take out a practice loan to buy a dental practice, whatever it is. And I would pick, with what we know today, might change in 4 years, but I would pick the repay plan because the repay plan will cause your interest to go, in my example, from $2,000 a month to $1,000 a month because your payment is 0 and there's an interest subsidy. So the repay plan's good if you're not married to have your balance grow by $1,000 a month instead of $2,000 a month. Now, if you go into a specialty like orthodontist, like to be an orthodontist, that's a 3-year residency program here in Chicago at UIC that pays $12,000 a year. You will continue to take out student loans for 3 years, but you can be on repay, have your payment be 0, and save about $40,000 over those 3 years in interest not paid because of the interest subsidy. If you pick one of the other income-driven plans, then you're going to start out with a lot more money to pay back. And in the dental space, your options are very limited for nonprofit. You've got the VA. So,
yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be a resource on an ongoing basis. Any other questions? Cool. Tristan, let's go ahead and stop the recording here, but we can stay on. I'll just